60 days ago, I stood over a patch of ground behind a house in central Virginia and watched a woman cry. She had spent $440 on raised bed soil, another $99 on organic fertilizer, and $44 on tomato starts, and every single one of them was dead. Brown stems, curled leaves, and roots that went nowhere. She asked me what she did wrong, but she did nothing wrong. The soil, it did nothing wrong. The entire system she was told to trust did this to her, and it does it to thousands of people every single season. That is the part no one says out loud. The dead garden is not your failure, it is the product. This is not a knowledge gap, it is a trap. The system needs you to fail just enough to keep purchasing the next fix. Meanwhile, grocery prices have climbed for 33 straight months. A single red bell pepper costs more than a gallon of gas, at least in some cities. Lettuce rots on trucks, stuck at distribution bottlenecks, while your backyard sits. It sits there, hardened and useless, waiting for the next bag. Waiting for something, shipped from a factory 3 states away. You are not bad at growing food. You have been made dependent on an input chain, designed to sell you things, not to feed you. Through my analysis of these economic disruptions, I have identified something. You haven't been failing, you have been sabotaged by design. And here is what sits underneath all of it. The part that actually matters. Somewhere around 1945, synthetic nitrogen and broad-spectrum pesticides arrived. And an entire industrial model was built on one premise. On the premise that chemistry could replace biology. Anything that could not be bottled, branded, and sold on a shelf was quietly scraped out of the curriculum. University extension programs stopped teaching wood-based soil recovery. They stopped by the 1960s. Indigenous planting techniques that had regenerated compacted ground. Regenerated ground for centuries were cataloged by anthropologists. Cataloged as boundary rituals and dismissed. A French peasant method called Boyes Ramal Fragmenten, which had rebuilt dead earth using nothing but fresh-cut branches. Fresh-cut branches pressed into the ground. Vanished from agricultural literature entirely. The last citation I could find was from 1974. That gap is not an accident. That is an industry protecting its revenue stream, making sure you never learn that the solution was free. In my search for alternatives to this extractive model, I found that archive and tested the method myself. On 220 square feet of compacted ground. Compacted and chemically exhausted ground. Within 33 days, something was moving underground. Something I could not explain with anything I was taught. Within 66 days, the soil was unrecognizable. Not because I added anything expensive, but because I stopped. I stopped fighting biology and gave it one material. Material it had been starved of for decades. And what was buried inside is what your soil is waiting for. In my research, I have identified a specific substance that the fertilizer industry prefers you never learn about: glomalin. It is a glycoprotein compound secreted by fungal threads, secreted in healthy soil, and it is the single substance responsible for holding soil particles together in loose clusters. Holding soil particles together in loose, breathable clusters. Without it, soil compacts into a slab. Water pools on the surface and roots hit a wall. Roots hit a wall 2 inches down and stop. Your plant goes in green and comes out yellow. And you stand there, blaming yourself. But the soil did not fail you. Someone killed the organism that held it together, and then sold you a bag of salt to replace it. That is the cycle. That is the entire business model. Synthetic fertilizer delivers a chemical signal. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in soluble salt form. The plant uptakes it fast, grows fast, and looks alive. It looks alive for a few weeks. But those same salts accumulate in the soil matrix. Accumulate year after year and shift the pH. They poison the fungal spores that would otherwise colonize. Colonize every cubic inch of ground beneath your feet. Basidiomycete fungi, the class that has been decomposing lignin, building soil infrastructure for 400 million years. They cannot establish in that chemical environment. Their spores go dormant and their hyphal threads never form. And without those threads, there is no glomalin. Without glomalin, there is no structure, and nothing works. Without structure, nothing else works. Not your compost, not your raised bed, not your $220 truckload of garden center soil. You were never bad. You were never bad at gardening. You were operating inside a system designed to make biology impossible and charge you monthly for the workaround. I have documented that tilling executes the same destruction from a mechanical angle every pass of a rototiller. Shreds the mycelial network that took months to weave itself through the top 6 inches of ground. One afternoon with a tiller undoes a full season of fungal colonization. The advice you get from every mainstream gardening channel is to till again in spring and break it up and start fresh. They do not tell you that you are resetting the biological clock to 0 every single year. Because if they told you that, you would stop buying inputs. Herbicides finish the job, and glyphosate does not just kill weeds, it chelates micronutrients in the soil and suppresses the very microbial populations that make those nutrients available to your plants. The ground looks clean afterward, bare and obedient, and completely dead beneath the surface where it matters. So here is the situation you are actually standing in. Your soil is not empty, it is suppressed. Fungal spores are still in there, dormant and waiting for a signal that the regime has made impossible for years. They do not need a product. They do not need inoculation from a pouch. They need a food source, lignin and cellulose. These are the structural compounds inside fresh, unprocessed wood. Introduce that into moist ground, and you are not adding an amendment, you are issuing an invitation. An invitation to an organism that predates every fertilizer company by 399 million years. Within weeks of contact, dormant spores activate. Hyphal threads emerge, thinner than a hair. Chemically aggressive and secreting enzymes that crack open locked phosphorus and calcium, while simultaneously weaving the structural fabric that salt and steel spent years tearing apart. The wood is not the fix, the wood is the trigger. And what it triggers has been waiting in your soil, waiting longer than you have been alive. Picture a hole in the ground, 20 inches deep, roughly the width of a broomstick. The walls are dark and almost black, coated in a thin glaze that shines faintly. When you angle a flashlight down into it, that glaze is worm castings fused with fungal residue. The air rising out is warm and smells like rain. 2 months ago, this spot was sealed. Concrete hard clay where water pooled and sat. Nothing lived in it and nothing could. Now it breathes, and all you did was pull. All you did was pull out a stick. Start at day 66 and rewind. The worm castings lining that channel did not appear. They did not appear on their own. Earthworms built them, dozens of them, tunneling toward that single point from the surrounding soil. Over the course of 3 to 4 weeks, worms do not wander randomly. They navigate by signal. They navigate by chemical signal, and it is fungal. Mycelium releases specific compounds as it digests wood. To an earthworm, those compounds are a scent trail. In dead soil, there is no trail. There is nothing for them to follow. The worms are still out there, but have no reason to move toward your garden. They are waiting for a signal that never comes. Now rewind further, before the worms arrived. The mycelium had already been at work for weeks. The moment a fresh green branch enters the earth, fungi native to that soil recognize a food source. Hyphae begin colonizing the surface within days. As they spread outward, they do something unique, something no tiller and no amendment can replicate. They physically reorganize the soil at a microscopic level. Pore spaces open between particles that were shut. Water that used to pool begins to moves vertically, pulled downward through channels no wider than a human hair. Oxygen follows, and oxygen at depth is the trigger for everything that comes next. This is not a single event, it is a cascade. Wood feeds fungus, and fungus restructures soil. Restructured soil sends a chemical beacon. The beacon draws worms, and worms bore macropores. Channels far larger than the mycelium could open. Those macropores accelerate drainage and aeration. Accelerate by orders of magnitude. Each organism hands the job to the next, and the next one amplifies it. No external input required, no purchase necessary. The specific wood matters, and this is where you fail. This is where most people fail, without knowing why. You need green wood, freshly cut and holding moisture. Still biologically active, with a specific diameter, between 1.1 and 2.2 inches. Willow, poplar, elder or fruit tree prunings. These species carry concentrations that fungi colonize. And willow adds hormones that kick the biology harder. Eucalyptus and black walnut will kill the process dead. They carry chemicals that suppress the microbial life. Life you are trying to wake up. Cut your branches no more than 52 hours. 52 hours before they go into the ground. If the wood dries out, the window closes. You are not building a fence, you are planting. You are planting a fuse. 1 foot spacing in every direction. In my field logs I have calculated the plot. An 11 by 11 foot plot requires many points. 121 insertion points. Yes, that sounds like a lot of sticks. It is one afternoon of work. But here is what that grid does underground. Each stake generates its own fungal radius. At 1 foot spacing, those radii overlap. They do not stay isolated, they find each other. What happens when 100 networks stop? When they stop being circles and start merging. Merging into a single connected system. That is the part no one talks about. And it changes everything about how you think. About how you think about the soil. 66 days after you slide a stick into ground. You twist it free and the soil resists. The soil does not want to let go. There is a faint grip, a quiet resistance, as if something has wrapped around the wood, wrapped itself around and claimed it. That resistance is not roots, it is not compaction. It is a living network of fungal threads. Threads that did not exist 2 months ago. Threads that built themselves in total darkness. While you did absolutely nothing. You did not water, you did not fertilize. You did not turn the earth. You pushed a stick into a hole. You walked away, and the ground started breathing. Breathing again on its own. That is the part no one prepared you for. The action is so small, it feels like a mistake. I have refined this into a simple protocol. A steel bar driven into the soil first. Punching a clean channel, 20 inches deep. Then a freshly cut hardwood stake. Pressed into the channel by hand. By body weight alone until 2 inches remain. 2 inches remain above the surface. Not hammered, never hammered, a mallet compresses. Compresses the soil at the entry point. Seals the place where pore space forms. The pilot hole keeps the channel open. The hand pressure keeps the structure intact. And that 2-inch stub is not left over. It is not leftover material, it is a wick. Morning dew collects and light rain traces. Rain traces down its grain. That moisture follows gravity into the column, feeding the process happening in the dark, where you cannot see it and do not manage. 2 weeks in, you press a finger. Press it against the exposed stub. If it resists and feels held from below, then the colonization has started. The mycelium is threading from the wood surface into the soil, building connective tissue. Tissue that industrial chemistry spent years dissolving. 50 years dissolving in the dirt. At 4 weeks, a white bloom may appear. Appear at the line around the stub. That is not mold that you should fear. That is not mold, it is confirmation. Confirmation that the network is expanding. You pull at 66 days, not 50. Not 75, but 66. Earlier, and the threads have not extended. Extended far enough to anchor themselves. Later, and the organism turns inward, consuming the stake rather than colonizing. The window is precise and costs nothing. Twist and lift with slow rotation. Never yank up because a sharp pull tears the threads, collapses the walls that took months to form. A clean twist separates wood from fungus. It leaves behind an open cylindrical pore, walled with tissue and ventilated, connected to moisture below the hardpan. A breathing shaft in dead ground, ground that could not absorb water before. The lower 14 inches will tell you everything. White threading across the wood surface, cream-colored mats and veining patterns, patterns pressed into the grain. In my observations, this is evidence. Evidence of a restored ecosystem. Hold it up and look at it. You are holding physical proof. Proof that the expensive problem required no spending. Picture the next supply chain collapse. It does not matter what triggers it. A port closure or a diesel shortage. A freeze that wipes out California lettuce. The shelves go bare in 80 hours. You have watched it happen before. Staring at empty bins in a fluorescent aisle. Feeling something tighten in your chest. Tighten in your chest, but not from hunger. It was the recognition that you have no backup. That every calorie traveled 1,600 miles. On a truck you do not control. Through a system that does not know you. Now picture a different kitchen. A woman in Tennessee who hasn't bought greens. Hasn't bought greens since April. Her backyard is not large or beautiful. Not beautiful in the way magazines show. It was a patch of dead ground. Concrete gray 3 seasons ago. She drove sticks into it and did nothing else. The fungal network did its job. It did what networks have done for millions. Done for 400 million years. It digested the damage and rebuilt structure. Open channels for water and roots. She planted into living soil. Made with her hands and 66 days. 66 days of silence. When the trucks stop, she walks outside. Pulls kale from ground she owns. From ground that answers to no corporation. This is not gardening, it is sovereignty. The difference is not skill or money. It is not money or acreage. It is whether someone showed you. Ground was always capable of feeding you. And you did not know because of industry. Because an industry needed you not to know. Every bag of amendment was a lease payment. A lease payment on soil you owned. Every failed garden was not your incompetence. It was evidence that instructions were written. Written by the people selling inputs. The soil was never broken, as they described. It was waiting for a language it recognized. That language is wood, and you speak it. The question is not whether this works. You have seen the mycelium. You have felt the soil, release the stake. The question is what you do now. What you do when the next disruption hits. When your neighbor is standing in a lot, hoping a delivery truck shows up. You hand them a stick. You walk them to a patch of ground. You show them what was hidden. You make one household that does not beg for permission to eat. That is the reason I am asking you. Send this to someone specific. Not everyone, but one person. The one you thought of while watching this. The one with the dead patch and bags. Expensive bags that never fixed it. They deserve to know what was buried. And you are now the archive. Tell me something about your soil. In my study of soil degradation, I am looking for the extreme cases. What is the deadest piece of ground you have? And how long has it been that way? Drop it in the comments. I want to see what we are working with. The next video involves desert soil and a Persian technique not yet decoded. That conversation starts better if I know. If I know what your ground looks like,